Hey, everybody. It is Eric J. Olson here for yet another live recording of the Managing Partners podcast. And today I have Tyson with me. Hey, Tyson, how's it going?
Hey, Eric, I'm great. How are you today?
Super fantastic. All right. Hey, before we dive into the question and answer section, I got to learn a little bit more about those horns and that hat back there. What?
Well,
That's a unique law library. So let's hear about it.
Thank you for asking. The horns come from my days as a capital defender. We got them from Texas, and we called down, and they said, we don't really sell these. And we said, well, we're lawyers doing nothing but death penalty cases at the trial level, and we got some horns like the next week. So it was a neat story behind that. Kind of a difficult way to earn the horns, but they were earned for sure. And but thank you for asking. And the hat is a segue really from the capital practice into not really no practice. I did probably 15 to 16. It sort of depends on whether you count the ones that were pending when I left of those cases. And I was part of a team. So in fairness, I have to mention that, and a great team it was. But that job put the whack on your head, frankly. And so I started an apparel company making wearable electronics. We got licenses with most of the major universities around the country. And nice. It was a lot of fun, and hence the hat.
I know we're not going to talk a lot about this, but wearable electronics. So like, this is my Garmin, right? And it measures my heart rate and every speed, I'm for running and biking and all that stuff. So I love this thing. I'm guessing you're talking about different kinds of wearables.
Well, I am. And actually, I think that Garmin, some of those folks maybe should thank us for helping create the category so that the buyers in those stores would know, who it was that would be buying it, because, a watch is easier, but with a hoodie that can control an iPod or an iPhone from the sleeve, or a jacket or a hat that will hold an iPod. Yeah, exactly. It was a very difficult thing because at that point there was no category. So we had to convince the stores that not only was it a cool product, but there was that the buyer, who was an apparel buyer or the electronics buyer, that they had to work together or create a third category, which, the footprint in the store is a big deal.
Oh yeah. That's really interesting. And yeah, I think wearables, it seems like it's still early for that, but certainly I think that, cell phones will be implanted here and speakers over here and cell phone in our fingers. Like, this won't just be like figurative anymore, like, in the future.
Exactly. That's right. This will only be hang loose. It'll go back to the meaning, right?
Well, hey, everybody, if you have, so actually, before I even say this, let's kind of frame like where I think this conversation is going. So, if you're watching this, then and you have questions about what we're going to talk about in a second, definitely post in the comment section. And if we catch the question while we're still live, then we'll answer it immediately. But so it sounds like, Tyson, you've done a couple of different things along the way, and sure. I think you're either in a pivot or you're accelerating into kind of a different area of the law. Is that a pretty good summary or oversimplification?
That's a fair way to put it. I'd say we're also accepting, embracing the future and what's coming, and having seen some years ago what was coming down the road in the hemp and cannabis space here in Virginia, it seemed to me be pretty obvious of an area of practice to move into. And the big sort of disco ball, the sexy disco ball that everyone is looking at is the flower cannabis side, marijuana side of things. Of course, we've had some big movement on here in Virginia just recently. Very exciting. Yeah. And but I think the tortoise in this tortoise and hare race, the not so sexy part, But one of the long sustaining sides of this is the hemp, the fiber and grain side. So while as president of the Cannabis Business Association of Virginia, 501c6 that we set up to help advance the interests of the cause of the industry and our members on the medical side and on the hemp side, we also are embracing this new recreational legislation and have done whatever we can to help assist the legislators in writing that.
Okay, so you're in the hemp industry at this point. All right, so anyone who's watching, if you have a question about anything to do with cannabis, hemp, marijuana, I'm sure there's other names. Yeah, definitely post them here and we'll answer them. Actually, that's, maybe you probably know this. I don't. What is the difference between marijuana, cannabis, hemp?
Great question. So the way I think of it is that cannabis is sort of an overarching term, that hemp is a varietal, first of all, or a cultivar, a type of plant that doesn't flower, doesn't produce the same, doesn't have the same properties, doesn't produce the same thing that, for example, the typical marijuana plant that people think about.
They're two separate plants.
Well, yes.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, the fiber and grain is it really looks very different, and the processing is totally different. It's decorticating. It's ripping the plant apart and using the fiber, getting to the core, which is called a hurd, which is great for all different kinds of applications, from animal bedding to padding in vehicles. So there's all kinds of neat stuff. But to answer your question, to me, it seems that the best way to frame it is that hemp is also a statutory creature. So it's really so there's a cultivar, but then there's the legal side of it. And that comes from Title VII of the United States Code, Section 1639, subsection O. So for everyone, I'll repeat that because it's worth writing down, or knowing anyway. 7 USC 1639, subsection O. And that defines hemp under the U.S. Code.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I try to read the Wall Street Journal every morning, and
Tall order.
It was early this week. There was it wasn't a big article, but it caught my attention because it was about Virginia, and that the I guess the state legislature, I don't know if like both houses approved a bill to legalize marijuana in Virginia for recreational purposes by 2024.
Right. And I'm going to tell you, just because there's so much to say, I'm going to have a sip of water real quick.
Sure. Yeah. So while you do that, it was one of those things where I lived in Virginia my entire adult life. I moved here when I was in 7th grade, and the Bible Belt is strong here, and it's a really big belt, and it goes pretty far across the United States, and we're feels like we're right smack in the middle of it. When this whole marijuana movement started, I definitely did not think that would ever happen here. Was that a surprise to you?
No, not really. And there's several reasons why. I think that Virginia has good sense economically. I think from a historical perspective, the Commonwealth has always done well, or at least okay, in terms of running the state. So we've had good management historically in Virginia, and I think with the recent administration being behind it, it made and coming out pretty early and saying that was helpful. Once the hemp legislation came, and the Commonwealth didn't really expect to see the flower, the smokable flower that came out from hemp, and one would scratch your head thinking, what did you think was going to happen? And it seemed to me that pretty much the race is on.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I think it's interesting. I'm sure there's people on both sides of the debate, if there's even still a debate happening about whether it's a good thing or bad thing.
I don't know that there is that much of one here. I think most people are embracing it. I think from a toxicological standpoint, most people realize that it's significantly more dangerous. I think, well, just as a matter of numbers, to have somebody drunk driving alcohol than somebody stoned who's going to be driving slow, probably.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. Yeah. So, at what point did you decide you wanted to look into this opportunity that was coming to Virginia, and maybe even for you beyond? And then how long did you kind of think about it before you're like, okay, I'm going into this?
Well, I guess it was 2017 when I had the first client approach me about the farm bill that was coming on the federal level with respect to hemp. So that's when I really started looking at it from a practice perspective. It's always been something, from a getting away from doing, death penalty or even, murder cases or just any kind of intense litigation. It's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, in terms of the stress level, but I'd say 2017 was when I had the first clients come, and that's when we started. That's when I and then some folks here started taking a good look at the federal legislation, and then what we thought was going to come in Virginia.
Okay, and then how long did it take before you were like, okay, I've done the research. Pardon me?
Like no time at all. I mean, as soon as that first client called, it was right. It was
there you go. You were in.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was one of those things where I thought, gosh, this is a no-brainer. There's going to be this sort of, white Jew lawyer reticence or hesitance to get involved. And I knew that I was going to take advantage of that because, people need those questions answered.
Yeah, and I would imagine that a lot of people were hesitant to even consider it, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are a lot of lawyers that are still kind of like a fair amount of the doctors, and we have there's a stigma associated with it, and that's fair. I mean, I understand their feeling of the stigma is what I mean is by being but I think it's pretty easy to shake when you look at it from the professional services perspective, and you're providing something that people really need to advance their own personal and professional interests and that of their families. So,
yeah, let's. I'm going to bring up your website.
Okay.
And maybe is this kind of representative of actually is this the actual practice name, Virginia Hemp Lawyers, or is this a brand?
That's a brand.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And there are several. In fact, it started as Virginia Cannabis Lawyers. Indeed, it started initially as Virginia Weed Lawyers, which I had domains on all of those at different times. And instead of competing with myself, I had some good advice and was instructed, hey, you should take down, one of those websites, and I did, and this one has really flourished. And we probably will move it back to embrace we are moving it currently to embrace Virginia Cannabis Lawyers. And we're doing that not only through the website, which likely will have a new brand up there pretty soon, but also, and actually there's some discussion here, some debate about whether or not we'll have a whole new website, one for hemp and one for cannabis. And that makes some sense to me too. So I should bite my tongue on that one, because I might get a hard time about it later. But anyway.
That was interesting advice about not competing with yourself. There's pros and cons for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think certainly all the effort should go into one of those websites if you have multiple. But then again, I'd rather be my own competitor than compete with someone else. There's a lot of people that we have to compete with. So I'd rather have 2 or 3 chips on the table versus, one. So yeah, pros and cons for sure. We've debated about that here at the shop a lot over the years. So.
And how is it that you've come down on the issue?
Well, in that particular discussion, we as a matter of fact, we just launched a new website called arraylaw.com, which talks very exclusively about our law firm marketing practice, as opposed to our normal website, which is thisisarray.com, which certainly talks about law, but it also talks about the other industries that we support. And so, we have a niche website, arraylaw.com, and then we have the more general one for the company as a whole. But the intent is to keep them both up and to actually get SEO value out of both.
Well, that makes good sense to me, and I think that's kind of where the argument here for having the hemp website be focused on the fiber and grain.
Yeah.
Because we have textile mills all along the southern border of Virginia in particular, and in the Coalfields region, that are empty. And if we can get those facilities back up and running, there are a lot of jobs that could be, in play.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Yeah, because certainly Southwest Virginia, that was textile country back in the day, and
big time.
And as far as I understand, it's just basically been decimated. And wow. Could it be brought back because of hemp? That's a great question.
Well, and one of the neat things about having jumped off this wearable electronics, apparel cliff that I really knew nothing about, but learned a lot, is that the hemp kind of plays right back into it. The fiber side of it, there's an expression: you never wear out a hemp garment, you only break it in, and that. It's one of the reasons why I didn't catch on, because it's not super comfortable against the skin. It's sort of a great outer garment or material for sort of a shell, in as much as a shell needs to be waterproofed and Gore-Tex-esque, I suppose. There may be some lacking there, but
so. I know we're probably going a little bit long. Are you okay for the next few minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm having having a good time.
Yeah, this conversation has kind of certainly gone in a direction we probably didn't anticipate, because I think it's a really interesting topic. And I've got a question here from a LinkedIn user. The name didn't come through, but with these new legislative changes in Virginia, what kind of opportunities do you see for business owners interested in getting into the cannabis space? Great question. I'm guessing you're hearing this a lot now.
Every day. Truly. In fact, several times a day. The short answer is they are as endless as one is creative. A more direct answer in terms of, what somebody's looking for. Well, there's the growing, there's the harvest, the processing, there's the retail and wholesale. I think people are missing some of the ancillary businesses, like where are people going to go? It's illegal to smoke on the street, or otherwise, consume. You can't open a beer and walk down the street. Can't smoke a joint, walk down the street. So where are people going to go? I think that's been completely overlooked, and that's a very necessary thing. So that would be one thing.
Interesting. Yeah. So I know that there's hookah shops or stores now. I don't think you can smoke marijuana in them. It's more like smoking tobacco.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you have a registration card, and you have a facility that has been permitted by the Commonwealth to allow people to go there. Think about people who live in apartments, particularly Section 8 housing and the federal issues related with that. What happens when a neighbor complains and somebody who has a medical card in Virginia, and all of a sudden they're concerned about losing their housing. That's really a big deal. And so, something as little as a business opportunity that would be wonderfully profitable, I think, if it was run properly, also solves a big social issue as it relates to someone possibly losing federal housing because they're doing something in violation of federal law. Yeah. And also in violation of the Virginia Indoor Clean Air Act. So many of the hookah lounges might, because they would already be in compliance with the Virginia Indoor Clean Air Act.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. Hey, I wanted to ask you, I have heard that you can go into vape shops and probably other retailers right now, and you can buy THC, CBD, but I mean, it looks like actual like buds, like that.
Yeah.
How is that?
Well, that's the point I was making earlier about the flower, the hemp flower. So what has happened? I call it placebo because it's like a placebo. It has the same terpenes. It has a lot of times it has the same kind of trichomes on it. It's covered, it looks like the icky of the sticky, but it's hemp. And imagine a police officer pulls somebody over, and they see a bag of that's not labeled. It's not otherwise in some retail packaging. It becomes very confusing very fast. And so, it's a big bummer for whoever it was, and at least until recently, that they would have it. I will make one important thing to add, because I'm surprised nobody's asked, but the Virginia Code as of March the 1st says that the odor of marijuana is no longer a basis to search. So that's a really big deal from the criminal defense side of things.
Oh, wow.
Really hard to overstate that.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I would imagine getting into this section of the law, probably a lot to discover for most people, for sure. I would imagine you know it fairly well, if not expert level, inside and out. What area are you planning on kind of like focusing in on? Like, I'm guessing there's the business aspect of hemp or cannabis law. There's the kind of like the consumer end of it. Are you focusing on one, both?
To be totally frank, Eric, right now we're trying to manage the flow, the intake. We're just getting completely hammered, which is a great thing. And so I'm thankful for that problem to fix. So I should say that for sure. I think probably as part of Cannabis VA, as the president currently of that organization, my focus has really been on the business side of it. Although I think what's going to happen with this new legislation, particularly since we're not going to see full legalization or at least implementation of legalization until January 2024, that what's going to happen is the pharmaceutical processors, the medical marijuana in Virginia, is going to explode. And so people will immediately, if probably already, are contacting their doctors and getting getting along that process to get their cards so that they can otherwise participate in that program until they're able to,
Gotcha.
go to a store.
Okay.
So
cool.
So
we have
helping them. I'm sorry.
So we've definitely talked a lot about this. Are there there's new news as far as the Virginia legislative putting this plan in place? Are there other trends that you have seen that you think are relevant to the discussion of hemp and cannabis?
I think actually cryptocurrency is of particular interest to me. I think there are methods of payment. Traditionally has been an all cash business, and that's been a real problem. You can imagine why. So we're seeing that happening anyway in the digital currency thing. So I would be on the lookout for the convergence of the two.
That's super interesting. I had never considered that, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. So it's a cash business because the banks won't allow you to open up a bank account since it's, yeah, because of the, it's still not legal at the federal level, but I guess they kind of allow it, but not officially. So yeah, and cash, I can imagine having several hundreds of thousands of dollars on hand, maybe more, could be a problem. Lots of security required. So if you could convert that into some other currency instead of United States cash, it could be anything else, really. I mean, gold, cryptocurrency, but cryptocurrency solves all those problems.
Sure does.
Wow.
And one of the big problems that has plagued the hemp space, particularly the flower side of it, that ultimately goes on to extraction, and then CBD products and CBG and CBN and all of the CBC now. So that continuum and protecting that is important, and brokers who really just knew one person and the next person, but weren't willing just to introduce the two people, but wanted a fee, which is not an unreasonable thing, I don't suppose, but using a fiduciary, a lawyer, for example, who has a responsibility to not rip you off, is a great way to do a transaction. And so, but of course, there are limits on what we can do under state and federal law. And so using crypto is a mechanism to eliminate all third parties and deal directly with your buyer or seller.
Fantastic. That's really, really neat. I appreciate that you highlighting that trend, because I did not see that intersection at all, but that's a great insight. So, well, hey, Tyson, I have taken up a lot of your time. I appreciate we were chit-chatting for about 5 or more minutes beforehand, so we're well over 30 minutes. So I respect your time, and we need to wrap up for sure. But this is super exciting. Can you let anyone who watches this video now or later know the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, if you reach out to us through VirginiaHempLawyers.com is the best way. Be on the lookout also for the Cannabis Conference Company. We've recently formed that, so we'll have a website up there. But right now, VirginiaHempLawyers.com. And thank you so much, Eric, for having me. It's been my pleasure to be here today.
You bet. All right, thanks so much. All right, everybody. That was a great episode. Appreciate it, Tyson, very much. That was fantastic. A lot of good information. If you want to see more episodes like this, head over to arraylaw.com/podcast. And if you are a managing partner looking to improve your marketing, then you can schedule a call with me or with my business partner, Kevin, and we can talk you through some options. You can find that contact us form at thisisarray.com or at arraylaw.com. Thanks, Tyson.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Eric.
Hang on.